Beginning in the late 18th century, Romanticism began as both an intellectual and artistic movement. The Romantic movement is often seen as a response to the confusion after the Enlightenment. Subjective reasoning became a more valued type of knowledge. Romanticism is also portrayed as the anti-neoclassical movement because of its criticism of the old established social order and religion. However, it's easy to draw parallels between the two movements, especially in the earlier years of Romanticism, with the painting of historic events, a major theme associated with neoclassicism. As Romanticism continued to grow, several characteristics began to define the movement. The Romantic style emphasized emotion, imagination, and beauty in nature. Drama and tragedy were portrayed through vivid depictions of human feelings. The emphasis on the individual can be shown by the popularity of portraiture. Images of man's struggle with nature, such as shipwrecks and animals, also came to define the artistic movement. Romantics were fascinated by heroes and investigated their own national identities, an important matter throughout the Age of Revolutions. Many believe Romanticism is a product of Christianity in the medieval era. Medieval religion led many to battle with guilt and powerlessness, which Romantics depict through mystery and the occult. Romanticism came to an end in the mid-19th century. The coronation of the Emperor Napoleon I and the crowning of the Empress Josephine in Notre Dame Cathedral on December 2, 1804 was painted in 1808 by Jacques-Louis David. David had some informal training in art and was sent to Italy in 1776, where he came into contact with the initiators of the classical revival. David supported the French Revolution and voted to kill King Louis XVI. David was imprisoned after the fall of Robespierre in 1794 and was released on the plea of his wife, who had divorced him because she was a royalist. They remarried in 1796. Napoleon appointed David as his official painter, and David became a supporter because he could hold his powerful social and artistic position. His portrayals of Napoleon look more romantic, even though he was opposed to the Romantic school. After the fall of Napoleon, David went into exile in Brussels, where he kept painting portraits. In the coronation of the Emperor Napoleon I and the crowning of the Empress Josephine in Notre Dame Cathedral on December 2, 1804, David has blurred the lines between neoclassicism and Romanticism. David was commissioned by Napoleon I and was present at the ceremony. Napoleon had become first consul in a coup d'etat and was crowned emperor in 1804. Napoleon was declared emperor by a pope to go along with Catholic tradition. However, Napoleon crowned himself and faced the congregation rather than the altar to show his independence from the Catholic Church. In the original sketch, Napoleon crowned himself, but in the actual painting he is crowning the Empress. This presents a more noble rather than authoritarian depiction of Napoleon. David has highlighted the protagonists by placing them in the center and illuminating them with a beam of light. The Pope sits among cardinals and bishops. Dignitaries are towards back right and holding symbols of imperial power such as the scepter, globe, and the hand of justice. Napoleon's brothers and sisters are on the left, and his mother is seated above him. This is a group painting of the imperial family, court, and clergy dressed in ceremonial costume. David has downsized Notre Dame Cathedral to give the figures a greater impact. On Napoleon's orders, David has also included Letizia Bonaparte, who was Napoleon's mom. She didn't approve of the ceremony and decided not to attend. David was also ordered to portray the Pope making a blessing. Napoleon ordered that his sisters be immobile, even though they were holding Josephine's train throughout the ceremony. Napoleon remarked after seeing the painting, "What relief, what truthfulness. This is not a painting. One walks in this picture." Another painting that blurs the lines between neoclassicism and Romanticism is The Death of Sardanapalus, painted in 1827 by Eugene Delacroix. Delacroix was a French Romantic painter whose use of remarkable color influenced the Impressionist painters. He made more than 850 paintings in his lifetime and depicted strong emotions in many of them. The Death of Sardanapalus was inspired by Lord Byron's poetry, and Liberty Guiding the People was the last painting of Delacroix's that truly represented his romantic ideal. At the end of his career, he did paintings at the Louvre and Museum of History of Versailles. Sardanapalus was the last king of Assyria, and he had failed in battle and was about to die. This painting is full of beautiful chaos, gorgeous color, and despair, violation, helplessness, and sacrifice. Even more violence is entering from the outside of the picture, and space is erratic, contrary to Renaissance ideals. The scene is constructed solely of bodies, furniture, and smoke. There is no ground or boundaries. In Francisco de Goya's The 3rd of May, 1808, the Spaniards are portrayed as martyrs who essentially become heroes. Francisco de Goya's paintings reflected contemporary historical upheavals. He is known for his scenes of violence, especially after Napoleon's invasion of Spain. At 14, Goya began to be a painter's apprentice and studied art in Italy. He first painted frescoes on a cathedral in Saragossa that made him known. A serious illness in 1792 left Goya completely deaf. He became isolated from others and began painting images of his imagination and satirical observations of mankind. He was the first Spanish court painter in 1799, and he was forced to be a court painter for the French from 1808 to 1814. After the restoration of the Spanish monarchy, Goya was pardoned, but no longer the #1 painter for the royals. When Napoleon's occupying army first entered Spain, Goya was in favor of Napoleon in Spain and wanted to maintain his job as a royal painter, so he made friends with the occupying army. Goya later sees all the damage that the occupying army caused, and when the French are expelled in 1814, Goya asked the provisional government to paint what happened to the Spaniards under Napoleon. The 3rd of May, 1808 is not a record of a single event, but a comment about power. Goya incorporated aspects of the irrational and predetermined brutality of men in uniform. The victims of power in the face of Marat's fighting squad cover their faces and pray. The white shirt of the man in the middle, who has his hands thrown up in the painting, inspired Goya. The painting is lit by a lantern on the ground in a heart shape in contrast to the tattered t-shirt. Another famous Romantic painting by Delacroix is Liberty Leading the People, painted in 1830. It is based on uprisings in Paris from July 27th to the 29th in 1830, where King Charles X of Bourbon is replaced with Louis Philippe, the Duke of Orleans. Delacroix was a witness and his emotions are translated into the painting. Delacroix depended on commissions from institutions in the royal family and helped to protect the Louvre's paintings from mobs in Paris. He focuses on the dramatic impact. The crowd breaks through barricades to make the final assault on the enemy camp. The victorious fervor is represented by the composition in the shape of a pyramid. The allegory of liberty is represented by the woman, a hero. Liberty has a Greek profile but is not perfect nude. This symbolizes a difference between neoclassical artists and romantic artists, because neoclassical artists would believe that a goddess would be perfect nude. Liberty has a modern-style gun in her hand that makes her look more contemporary and gives her credibility. 2 Parisians spontaneously join the fight. On the left, there is one that is scared, and on the right is Gavroche, a symbol of youthful revolt and sacrifice for a noble cause. He wears a black velvet beret that many students wore and lets out a war cry. The man in the bourgeois top hat may be Delacroix himself or a friend. Notre Dame in the background represents liberty and Romanticism. The Nightmare, painted in 1781 by Johann Heinrich Fuseli, represents the incredible importance of emotion in Romanticism. Fuseli was the son of a portrait painter and was trained as a priest. He went to England where his painting was encouraged and then traveled to Italy to study art. Fuseli's works were very imaginative and he painted many literary subjects. The Nightmare is very gothic and has 3 prominent characters, a woman and 2 creatures. The brightest part of the painting is the woman from the chest up, an unconscious mind in a helpless exposed body. The monster in the top of the painting's lower half is dark and blends with gloom. The hideous shape and nature becomes more evident as you look up the figure's body. Fear is added because the creature is not actually doing anything to the woman. The bulging eyes of the monster that meet the viewer show a mind at work. In the far left, there is a horse barging into the picture out of darkness. He is depicted as suddenly entering the picture and embodies hysteria and sadness. All the horrors in The Nightmare are carefully placed and dramatically timed. In 2 Men Contemplating the Mood by Caspar David Friedrich, Friedrich emphasizes the importance of nature in human senses. Friedrich was a German landscape painter whose paintings were based on northern Germany after close observations of nature. Some paintings were the expression of religious mysticism. Friedrich did a lot of anti-classical work because religion is present but not the focus. 2 Men Contemplating the Moon is the 3rd version of one of Friedrich's most famous paintings. The 2 men are Friedrich himself and his colleague. The mood is pious contemplation. It is seen from the back so the viewer can participate in their communion with nature. The landscape is imaginary but based on studies of nature Friedrich had made. The men wear old German dress that signifies their opposition of ultra-conservative policies being enforced after the Napoleonic Wars. Another romantic painting that emphasizes the importance of nature is Entrance to the Wood, Ville d'Ivry, painted in 1825 by Jean-Baptiste Camille Corot. Corot was a French man who abandoned his commercial career for art. He painted landscapes and traveled throughout France to paint. The skillful observations and colors and the entrance to the wood make this painting one of Corot's most attractive. The warm hues catch the eye as well as the central prominent tree. The entrance to the wood was painted just before Corot left for Italy in 1825. Corot painted this scene very frequently. My final painting is The Fighting Temeraire, painted in 1839 by J.M.W. Turner. This painting represents nature's power over humanity. Turner was born in London and received little schooling. He put his painting in his father's barber shop to sell, and at 15, the Royal Academy exhibited one of them. Turner left his fortune to support decaying artists. The Fighting Temeraire is a painting of a 98-gun ship that fought in the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805. The Battle of Trafalgar was a sea battle during the Napoleonic Wars. It was the British Navy versus combined French and Spanish fleet. The British proved victorious and confirmed their naval supremacy. The ship became known as the Fighting Temeraire after the battle and was in service until 1838, when it was decommissioned and was taken apart. The painting meant to represent the British naval decline. The Temeraire is traveling away from the sunset. Turner's main concern is to evoke a sense of loss rather than recording the exact event. The setting of the sun draws parallel with the passing of the warship. The steam-powered tug is smaller but much less beautiful. The age of revolutions in the late 18th to mid-19th centuries led to the breakdown of the old order in Europe. Because of the ideas associated with this revolutionary era, Romantic artists sought to defy traditional values by emphasizing senses through the portrayal of nature, human emotion, and the heroes of the age.